We're ranking recent Badgers coaches. Who was better, Bo or Barry?
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Ryan Herrings. I am stoked that you are here. Today's episode, we are taking a bit of a break. We have a little bit of a gap between basketball games, a little bit of gap in recruiting news, and sometimes it's fun to have the bar conversations that fans have. So we were talking about this on Discord. We talked about it a little bit on Twitter. We're going to talk about the recent Badgers coaches, football and basketball. We're going to rank them from top to bottom, from that Hall of Fame tier of Bo and Barry all the way to the bottom. We're doing that today. Plus some of your thoughts, some of your comments about Nolan Winter, Kidsinger, football stuff, Yak. Really fun show today. Here's the coaches. Let's start with this. These are the coaches we're ranking. Gary Andersen, Paul Chryst, Greg Gard, Bo Ryan, Barry Alvarez, and Bret Beilema. So the most recent coaches. I think Fickle needs another year before he can be on this list. But honestly, if you were to put him on this list, he'd be at the bottom of it right now. I still think Fickle is going to, I think, turn it around. I think this year is going to be better. I talked about that. I'm not off that boat, but just based on 2 years of experience, people don't like Gary Andersen. Gary Andersen brought Wisconsin to a Big Ten championship game. I think you'd have to put Fickle just based on what we've seen so far at the bottom of that list. But again, I don't really think it's fair 2 years in to do that. So we're going to rank those other ones. First, let's get to the non-Bo and non-Barry rankings, because that's going to be the next segment. And that one's fascinating by itself. Who do you think is the better coach, Bo or Barry? And use whatever criteria you want. This is pretty open-ended. Use what he did, his record at Wisconsin, what he's done elsewhere. Who would you rather have kind of start a program with, whether on the football side or basketball side? Bo or Barry? I mean, just incredible choices there. But let's start with the other four. So Gary Andersen, Paul Chryst, Greg Gard, Bret Beilema. How would you rank those four? Again, using whatever kind of subjective individual metrics you would want to, how would you rank those four, combining kind of what they did at Wisconsin? How good do you think they are? What their legacy is? How much you'd like to start a program with them? I'm going to start at the bottom and work my way up. I think those four, you have to start at the bottom with Gary Andersen. He's only here a couple years. I will say this, though. I've said this before. I will go to my grave bed with this one. Gary Andersen doesn't get enough credit at Wisconsin for what he did. Paul Chryst won with a lot of Gary Andersen's guys. Gary Andersen had a very good record. I think he was 13-3 in the conference. He went to a Big Ten title game. Now, ... He got beat in that Big Ten title game 59-0, right? But he recruited pretty darn well. He brought in a lot of guys that would end up forming the core of some great Paul Chryst teams. You know, some of those Gary Andersen recruits ended up being big-time guys, ballers, defensive players, then Charles Jamersons and like Chris Orrs and Tanner McAvoy's. Like, he brought in defensive linemen. He rebuilt the offensive line. He recruited pretty well. Like, he recruited pretty darn well. Now, he's last because he kind of wigged out at the end, because he certainly wasn't a long-term fit. He had some very weird recruiting things where he kept trying to shoehorn people in that just admissions wasn't going to take. That, quite frankly, some of the guys he was trying to shoehorn in were like legal risks. I mean, by the end, he was recruiting a couple kids from Texas, cornerbacks. I forget the kid's name, but the one was involved in like a drive-by murder. He had a couple other players flame out. He had a cornerback from Everett, Massachusetts, I think, that came and left right away. And every coach has some of that. He felt like he had more of that, right? He was really trying to get a bunch of JUCOs in. It wasn't a long-term fit, but he was statistically pretty darn good while he was here. And by the way, more importantly than all of that, he is the guy that revolutionized Wisconsin's defense and led to the dominant stretch, 5-year stretch, whatever it is, of Wisconsin defense. He's the guy that brought in Dave Aranda. He's the guy that transitioned us from a 4-3 to a 3-4. A lot of credit there. I think you have to give him a lot of credit. Next up, so I have Gary Andersen. Then I have Paul Chryst. I have Paul Chryst at third on that grouping. He did great things. Great records, that 2017 team. He was orchestrator of a really good defense. He brought in some nice quarterbacks. He elevated recruiting for a while. The Orange Bowl win, he's a guy who saw the early potential in Jim Leonard, was able to keep Dave Aranda, which I thought was a really smart move. Like, sometimes the smartest moves are retaining the people that make sense to retain and not having so much of an ego that you have to override it and bring in your own guys. No, he's like, Dave Aranda's the guy, we're going to keep him. Yeah, Paul Chryst was great for Wisconsin. Culture builder. Players liked him. Never embarrassed university. I think the knock on him, Whereas Gary Andersen, the knock was, he doesn't understand the fit. He doesn't understand the culture. Paul Chryst was just too slow to adapt to where college sports was headed, from NIL, from the portal, adapting to, you need a recruiting department. You can't go 8 months without a recruiting department. Quarterback recruiting had faltered under him towards the end. But no shade to Paul Chryst, who was a multiple Big Ten Coach of the Year, orchestrated some great teams, came close to the playoffs. Certainly a really good offensive mind when he was really sharp into it. So Paul Chryst, I guess, number 3. Number 2, do you go Beilema and guard, or guard and Beilema? Who's your 3 on that list? This is tough for me. I'm going to go Greg Gard. As next up on this list. The difference between, I think, Gard and Chryst, who up until a certain point in the career were at a very parallel sense of, they kind of did it a certain way. People looked at them as maybe a little stubborn, but they were pretty successful. Greg Gard flipped that switch, right? He adjusted, he adapted, he's running a new system, he brought in new people. He's changed the way they're playing offense. Like, he really bought all into the portal, to what they're trying to do, finding talent there. So I have him above Chryst for those reasons, right? I think he showed more ability to adapt, and he's a great coach. He's been a great coach this year. Like, this team could make another run. He's had several good years. He's one of the fastest Big Ten coaches to 100 wins. Again, much like Chryst, he set a culture. He's not going to embarrass the university. I got Greg Gard here, and then I got Beilema at the top of this list of 4. I just think he's a really good coach. I think he understands exactly what he wants. I think he can set a culture. He does a really good job of finding assistant talent. Like, he's a very good evaluator of assistant coaches, finding talent to bring in that sense. He's a good recruiter, just in the sense of setting a culture, finding talent, helping to sell it. He's not a brilliant tactical guy from an X's and O's standpoint, but he got to the Badgers to 3 Rose Bowls. Now, one of those is a little wonky because there were teams ineligible. But then, when in that wonky one, he went and blasted the doors off Nebraska. These teams were always physical. He had a great strength and conditioning department, which you got to give him. You always got to give CEO types of credit for having the right pieces around them. They had tough teams, physical teams. This team's always had identity. They rarely lost to bad teams. Not ever, but they rarely lost to bad teams. They usually took care of business against the teams they were supposed to, and they punched the better teams in the mouth. And then he went and coached with Belichick for a while. So I think that's another one where Belichick's he doesn't stand fools for that long on the football side. And he was with Belichick for a couple of years, and he's flipped Illinois back around. He's a good coach. He understands Big Ten football. Again, not a brilliant tactical mind for sure, but he's a good coach. I think he's a better coach now than he was, but he was really good at Wisconsin. And I think there's a reason Barry turned to him when it was time to hand off the reins. So that's that 4, right? I've got Gary Andersen, Paul Chryst, Greg Gard, Bret Beilema. Tell me in the comments if you would rearrange those orders. Coming up next, Barry or Bo? That's coming up next on Locked On Badgers. First, a quick break for our friends of the show over at Wayfair. Listen, Wayfair is incredible. After the holiday hustle, which is like, sometimes you got to give your home a little TLC. I always find that decluttering and refreshing my space helps me get back into routine, whether you're tidying up, clearing out, or you just want to give your space a new look to start the year. Wayfair is everything you need, all within your budget. I bought this couch on Wayfair. I talked about it. I needed something for the space. I wanted something comfortable, not that expensive, something that would get shipped to me because I'm not by a bunch of big stores. Wayfair is perfect for that. I found the perfect couch, cheaper on Wayfair than in other competing sites. It got shipped to me quickly, unbox it, and it's perfect. It's a great fit. I found that on Wayfair because I knew that's where I wanted to go to find any type of furniture. There's something for every style and every home, no matter your space or budget. Wayfair makes it simple to tackle your New Year's goals with endless inspiration for every space and every decor style. It's as simple as that. Better inventory, more stuff, more things, better prices, easy delivery. Give your home the refresh it needs. It's Wayfair. Head to wayfair.com right now. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. All right, let's get back into this. Now it gets tricky, right? Bo Ryan or Barry Alvarez? Who's the better coach? And I think it's super incredible. I probably could have worded that better, but it's absolutely amazing that I had in the space of my fandom, that as Badger fans, we had 2 Hall of Fame coaches in such short succession. There's programs that go entire decades, their entire program's history, and they never have a Bo Ryan or they never have a Barry Alvarez. We had them kind of almost concurrently, right? It was incredible to have both of these coaches on both sides of the most revenue generating sports, the sports with the most eyeballs. You have a Bo Ryan on one side, a Barry Alvarez on the other side, just absolutely incredible. Like you're not going to have that again. Bo Ryan in the Wisconsin Hall of Fame, Barry Alvarez, Wisconsin Hall of Fame, and so Bo Ryan as well. Bo Ryan in the basketball, the Naismith Hall of Fame just went in this last year. Incredible, stunning that we had the ability to have both these guys like in-house, and both of them, like Wisconsin, kind of became their identity. Like Bo Ryan didn't coach anywhere after Wisconsin. Barry Alvarez is, up until a couple years ago, still involved, still doing podcasts, was representing kind of the Big Ten in Wisconsin on the college football playoff committee. He came back to coach bowl games. How insane is that? We're going to pluck this legend from the retirement and come back and coach a bowl game for us, and players loved it. Just two complete legends. And I realized having people choose between which one is better, like who's the better coach, Bo Ryan or Barry Alvarez, it's like, what's the better, running back, Barry Sanders or Jim Brown? I don't know. Why are you making me choose? Why are you making me choose? But I think these are bar conversations or fun conversations to have. I'm going to tell you, I think Bo Ryan wins. I think he's a better coach. And Barry's probably more of a builder. Barry is a guy who came in, he coached football, but when you look back at what Barry did, is it more, what a great job coach, or, oh my goodness, he built this athletic department. He helped build this athletic department. And listen, give credit to people who came before. Give credit to Pat Richter. Give credit to Dick Bennett. Give credit to a lot of other people. But Bo Ryan helped establish Wisconsin Barry Alvarez helped establish Wisconsin as a national brand. Like it's almost bigger than football. But if we're just talking coaching, man, Bo Ryan, I don't know if you can beat that resume. Here's the thing. Barry had a couple of down years. Every once in a while, he had a 5-win season, a 6-win season, right? The football program went up and down a little bit more. It never went down under Bo. There was never a down year. It was fourth in the Big Ten or better every single year, like a metronome. I mean, you could, navigators before the GPS, when you're sailing under the stars, you would set your navigation to points that you knew were never wrong. You could set your navigation to Bo Ryan finishing fourth in the Big Ten over a consistent period of time. 75% of his I think 70% winning percentage, something like that. He won national titles at a lower level. Just incredible consistency. And I think that's why he is the better coach than Bo. I just think there's more consistency. I think there's more of a track record at different levels of doing it. But Bo took over a more well-oiled machine in Madison than Barry did too, right? Barry took over a team that was in the throes of death and despair, right? He completely turned the culture and the program around. Bo didn't have to do that in Madison, so when he came in, it was in a better spot. It was in a healthier spot. So I don't know. If you ask me again tomorrow, and I'm very curious what you would say in the chat, if you ask me again tomorrow, maybe I changed my mind. But I just think if we're talking just coach, you look at the track record from Bo, you look at him, like the team never having a bad year. I think you got to go Bo is where I'm at. So here's my ultimate list. Let me know in the chat again. Sometimes it's just fun to break away and have these kind of bar conversations. So I'm going Bo Ryan, Barry Alvarez, Bret Beilema, Greg Gard, Paul Chryst, Gary Andersen. And Gary Andersen with an asterisk, I still think people are too hard on him. But I definitely, if you put him up on that list, he can't be above any of them. He can't be above any of those guys based on what they did and their tenure at Wisconsin. All right, so that's that list. Let me know in the chat in the comments where you guys are at. I have a couple quick comments I wanted to throw up here. This one's from Chemin K. He said, replace Max Steinecker with Clint Cosgrove. Listen, I love Clint. Clint is a good human. He knows ball. He's talented. Like, he's great. Clint is great. I'll never say a bad word about that dude. He is a kid. And that's the only thing, man. If you're going to be like that Max guy, you got to be putting in like 60 or 70 hours a week. And maybe Clint would do it. I don't know. I love the dude. I think he'd be successful doing that. I think he'd be successful doing kind of anything along the lines of scouting and football development and finding talent and establishing relationships. But it just might be a bit of a young man's game. I don't know. I wanted to hit this one. This is from Mark. I really like how Yak fits in with the new OC and system. I hope he's a lock in the top 3. I think Aker has a role in it too because of his size and blocking abilities. Yeah, I like that. I think both of them are going to play. But here's the thing, like Darion Dupree, Dylan Jones, you got to feed them. How many carries are left? If those two guys are playing now, people get hurt in football. But if Yak is number 3 and Aker has a role, and you're going to feed Koziel and Billy Edwards is going to get some more carries. You got Tretch coming back and Vinny Anthony. I'm not trying to make the point that there is a surplus of weapons in Madison. Like, oh my gosh, how are they going to hit all these guys? There's so much talent everywhere. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying there's a lot of bodies. There's a lot of people that are going to want carries. It's going to be hard. Like, Yak's going to have to make the most of his opportunities. I think with Yak, and the one thing I wanted to point out, watch for the spring. Watch to see what happens coming out of spring, coming into spring. I'm going to be covering the team for some of that. I'm hoping to get back down to Platteville. If he's not getting many reps, there's a spring portal transfer window. And honestly, now there's a portal transfer window everywhere, apparently, in all times, any times, any circumstance, whatever. I don't know. But see if he's getting reps in spring. See if he's looking like, yeah, they really want to involve him. Because if not, maybe it might be his last stand. And I'm rooting for him. I think he will fit this system. I think he'll fit this OC. But it may be about his last stand, unfortunately. All right. One more quick break. This is from Running with Jason. And then we have a couple comments on the next set of the break. He said, I love how matter of fact you guys. So this is coming from the conversation I had with John McNamara yesterday's show. We talked about that 4-game stretch, right, where they have to go to Michigan, they get Ohio State at home, Iowa at home, and then they go to Oregon. And I kind of said, I think it's probably 0-4, maybe 1-3. Maybe you beat Iowa. I mean, that is a 4-game brutal stretch. It's back to back to back to back. Running with Jason says, I love how matter of fact you guys are 0-4 or 1-3 during that midseason stretch. Why even bother being a fan if you think that's the case? I hear you. I don't know. Because I know nothing else, because this is my life, and I bleed sports. I dream about it at night. I wake up screaming David Gullery's name into the midnight air as my wife wakes up with a startle. I don't know. Because I still think Chase Hammond was a healthy ankle away from being an impact player. And I often wonder why Chris Borland wasn't blitzing on the Michigan State Hail Mary. I don't know. I don't know why I bother, but I do because I love it. That doesn't mean I think we're going to beat Ohio State next year, or Oregon, or we're going to go into the big house and beat Michigan. As up and down in Michigan was last year, they beat Ohio State, and they beat them pretty easily. That's a physical team. I don't know. This team's got to be a lot better for me to say we're going to do more than 1-3 in that stretch. And I hope they do. Like, I hope you're right. I hope I'm crazy for being this pessimistic. I hope they go 2-2. If they go 2-2 that stretch, man, we'll open a bar and I'll serve shots all night. But until that happens, I got to see it, man. I'm not trying to be pessimistic, Running with Jason. I appreciate the comment. I got to see it. I got to see it. And I do think this team will be better next year, but better as in beating Oregon or Ohio State or Michigan on the road. I don't think so. I hope so, but I don't think so. All right, we're going to take one more quick break, come back. Am I being too hard on Nolan Winter and where he's already ahead of Frank Kaminsky? That's coming up next, Locked On Badgers. But first, a quick second to say thank you, as always, for tuning in. Really do appreciate you. Let's talk about this comment I got here. I like this one a lot from Prine. Thank you for the comment, Prine. He says, it seems we are too critical of Winter. I feel like his progression has been better than Kaminsky, which is kind of scary. That's true. That is so true. If you look at where Kaminsky was 2 years into the program, compare him to where Winter is right now, Winter's ahead of that curve. So that's because it was needed. You didn't need Kaminsky as early. In that sense, are we too critical of Winter? Probably. We probably are. He's ahead of the curve for big man development. 2 years in, I think you like him better than what Reavers was showing 2 years in, who was another player who had to play early because of lack of front court depth. Yeah, absolutely. I do think we're too hard on Winter, but I would say this, the players that are really talented and you see a high upside for, you start to expect more from, right? I think we're hard on them because we see the ceiling. We're hard on them because we see the star there. You know, coaches would always tell you, don't get mad when I'm getting on you. Start to get mad when I'm not getting on you. Because if we're continuing to get on you, that's because we think there's another level there. Now, it's not that Nolan Winter can hear me being critical at times and that's going to help him motivate him to get better. It's not that. It's just there's so much talent there. There's so much latent ability with footwork, quickness, shooting ability, athleticism, the ability to guard on the perimeter, weak side shot protection, a little bit of toughness, footwork in the post, good hands. Like, he can do so much. He's one of the more skilled bigs that have come through this program, and a program rife with skilled bigs. You flip the pages of past Badger teams, they're filled with stretch fives that are pretty skilled. Winter's near the top of that skill level. He is. He absolutely is. And that's, I think, why we're kind of hard on him sometimes. Because to whom much is given, much is expected, right? Whatever Spider-Man Marvel quote you want to go to, he's got a lot of tools. And we just want it to become a little more consistent. Because if it does, this team, it helps to unlock another level. he can do things crowd can't do. He can do things a lot of bigs can't do. His fluidness in his game is really unique. I still think it reminds me to some degree of John Lure. John Lure maybe a little more compact, not quite the same body type, but I think he can be an NBA guy if he keeps developing, much like John Lure. I think he can be a guy who can stick in the NBA for a while with his ability to stretch the floor, his ability to, do a lot of versatile things on the offensive end, including being a decent passer for a big man. So I hear you. We probably are too hard on Nolan Winter. I think it's because he's really good and there's a tremendous ceiling there. This comment here from Kevin S. Talking about Zach Kinzinger, who I went to see. I think this is a really interesting comment, so I appreciate Kevin putting it up here. He said, Ryan, is Kinzinger similar to Max Klesmit? I had to think about this for a while because I was struggling to find a good comp to Kinzinger. I know I'd heard combinations of Brad Davison, Bronson Koenig, Ben Brust, but he doesn't really feel like any of those players. I think Klesmit is maybe a closer comp to me. I think this is a really interesting one. I think he's probably got a little bit more. I mean, Klesmit's a pretty good passer. I think this is a pretty interesting comp. I got to be honest, Kevin. I think, and I'll say this: like if you get a Klesmit from a recruit, that's a win. That's always a win. You're getting a starting caliber Big Ten guard. That's a win. I think he's probably going to be a little bit quicker, a little bit more mechanically sound shooter. Like I really like Kinzinger's jump shot, his balance, his ability to release quickly. I don't think you're going to see a little bit more of off ball movement from him. But I think they're pretty similar sizes. Kinzinger's probably a little more cut up as an athlete, maybe a little bit better of an athlete. I could see that a little quicker getting into the paint. I think he might have a little more slashing ability, a little more finishing ability. That might be the differentiator, but I think similar type of combo guard, tough defensively, smart player, high IQ guy, good shooter, will space the floor. I think it's a good comp. And by the way, if you get a Klesmit, that's a win. Absolutely a win. If you get a contributing starting caliber Big Ten guard who over the course of his career will start several seasons for you, absolutely a win. So, yeah, I could see that. Maybe a little more upside just because Kinzinger, I think, has a little more ability to slash. He's got a little bit more ability with his handles left and right, and probably a little bit more ability to get in the paint. I think that might be the differentiator, but he's got to prove it still. And up until this point up until this year, Klesmit's been a very good college shooter. So, yeah, I actually think it's a pretty good comp, man. I love it, Kevin. I appreciate it. One more comment that we had, but I forgot to put in here. But we had a question about who is. I asked John McNamara this: who is going to be the Elijah Hills of this year's team? Right, the transfer portal guy who blows up, nobody sees coming, and he said Parker Peterson. So someone in the comments said, "Well, who's yours, Ryan? Who's the guy that you think could blow up? Who could be, make a bigger impact than expected?" I think one of the safeties is a really interesting pick for that. If you're going to go for the Elijah Hills Award, maybe a Matt Young, a guy from D3. A guy that, I think internally as Wisconsin fans, we like the story, but he could be a baller. Like he could be an in-the-box guy. He's physical. He plays a lot like a lot of the go back to the throwback Wisconsin in-the-box safeties that are just kind of rugged, tough, always around the ball, kind of tone setters, leaders on defense. I think Matt Young could be that kind of guy potentially. I think he's interesting. Suggs is the other one that I'd point out. If you go look at Suggs' pass rush grades, again, didn't play a ton at LSU, but his pass rush grades are pretty elite. They would have been the highest on this defense last year. They would have been higher than Hills. He has really, really unique burst. I know some people on staff like him a lot. So I think JVR Suggs, Matt Young could be candidates for my Elijah Hills Award as a guy who just kind of outplays expectations based on what they were coming into the portal. Yeah, I think those two would work. All right. On Wisconsin, as always, really do appreciate you. We got Nick Osen coming up tomorrow. Another guest hopefully later this week. Plus, we got Purdue this weekend. A lot of content coming up. On Wisconsin, as always, really do appreciate everybody for tuning in. When Jenny, go check out Locked On Big Ten, all the biggest stories from the conference realignment all over there on the Big Ten channel. On Wisconsin, and we will talk later.